Hey, everybody. Jay Widener here. Thanks for watching. Hit like, subscribe, and all that. Today, I'm going to be reading a review of my film that I did with Ryder Lee, JFK X. And it is called JFK, Was It Faked? By James Day. He's a writer. I'll talk a little bit more about him when I get done with this. So this came out about 3 days ago, and I do appreciate it. I think it's the only review that we've gotten, a professional review anyway. My wife told me there was a new JFK doc on Prime. With two toddlers, we don't have much time to ourselves, but I'm open to anything people are doing about the assassination. After everyone went to bed, I carved out 89 minutes for reviewing, and boy, am I glad I did. Solving the JFK X, Solving the Crime of the Century, is edited and directed by Ryder Lee. It's his only credit on IMDb, but he has an extensive YouTube channel and podcast, Raised by Giants. The film is produced by Jay Widener, who also runs a YouTube channel, Reality Check. Widener previously presented on Kubrick's The Shining and the purported symbolism and meaning therein. These days, plot and other elements of a film are well known beforehand through leaks, articles, trailers, and videos. I have come to value ignoring all of that as often as possible in favor of the element of delighted surprise. So it was with my screening of JFKX, but some patience is required through roughly the first 30 minutes as it covers familiar ground leading up to the November 22nd, 1963 assassination. A large portion is dedicated to the Kennedy brothers' battle with organized crime. The filmmakers are here foreshadowing what is to come. They do this through carefully chosen language from the narrator, teaser lines from Widener, the film's sole talking head, and certain images chosen from the Zapruder film. And it is the Zapruder film that is the key evidence in JFK's argument. By now, a household name, of course, refers to the 27-second 8mm home movie of the assassination shot by dressmaker Abraham Zapruder from the North Pergola in Dealey Plaza. It always struck me how remarkably cool Zapruder reacted to what was unfolding before him. His camera pan barely shakes when the president is gunned down, and for an amateur, Zapruder operates the camera like a war photographer as he continues filming while Jackie climbs on the trunk. Clint Hill rushes onto the car, and the limousine finally disappears out of frame. I always wondered, if Zapruder was able to maintain such composure during the ambush of the president, why didn't he keep filming the rest of the motorcade? It's not conceivable the purported sniper would have kept it is not conceivable the purported sniper would have kept shooting at the motorcade, possibly severing the chain of government, LBJ, Senator Yarborough, and others. It is not out of the realm of possibility the shooter could have been a precursor to Charles Whitman, a sniper in the University of Texas Tower, who picked off 15 people and injured 31 in 1966. The worst thing you can say about Zapruder's filming abilities is when he lets the limo drift down almost entirely out of frame right at the fatal frame 313. To Jay Widener, however, this is not Zapruder's fault, but a telling optical manipulation done by technicians after the fact for a very specific reason. For Widener makes the case that a hoax is on display in the Zapruder film. JFK cites the 2003 book, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, edited by James Fetzer, which argues that the Zapruder film, was heavily retouched and that the Zapruder film was heavily retouched and edited. However, Widener suggests the book's authors were misled. The Zapruder film wasn't a hoax, but the events in Dealey Plaza were. This is where the film kicks into high gear as it presents its central premise, outlandish as it may be, and yet somehow I kept watching, enthralled and stupefied. Widener makes the case that there were no gunshots fired in Dealey Plaza. He points out the lack of reaction from the crowd when such gunshots were apparently going off. He points out that what we see happen to JFK does not reflect what the Parkland hospital doctor saw. We see no blood from the gunshot wound to the neck. Widener points out 2 splices, including a splice with missing frames when the freeway sign blocks Zapruder's angle of the limo. Widener claims the explosion at frame 313, the all-important headshot, was not the result of a bullet, but a squib, as in the special effects squib any student of action movies would recognize. In other words, JFK X, solving the crime of the century, claims there was no assassination at all in Dealey Plaza, but that the 35th president of the United States faked his own death, lived out his days on Aristotle Onassis' Ionian Sea Island Scorpios. What Jackie retrieved on the back of the limo, according to Widener, was the squib. This is not exactly an original conspiracy theory, but the notion of the squib, as far as I could ascertain, certainly is unique. Widener goes on, his theory incorporating murdered Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit as a replacement corpse for JFK, that Oswald was given a black sweater to hide the lack of blood from his own staged murder at the hands of Jack Ruby. And is that a white-collared shirt Oswald has on? Why would the president do this? And who was the creative mastermind who helped direct the action? Who showed JFK how to set the squib and how Jackie was to react? The film argues that Kennedy knew that, like Caesar, he was surrounded by enemies, so he decided to beat them at their own game. The film argues that Kennedy was deeply influenced by Lincoln's stature and American lore as being revered for enduring assassination than by a potentially weakened legacy dealing with Reconstruction in the second term. Could the eerie similarities between Lincoln and Kennedy assassinations be, then, a mere in-joke for those who know the whole thing was a scam? I hadn't thought about that, but that's a pretty good point. If it was a scam, who scripted and directed it? Might have the assignment fallen to a young filmmaker named John Frankenheimer, who in November 1963 was 3.5 months from the premiere of his new film, 7 Days in May, an adaptation of a 1962 novel about a military conspiracy to topple the government, and a book JFK himself wanted to see produced as a film? The Frankenheimer notion itself has come up before, namely by Tyler McCloskey in his essay, JFK TV, the Kennedy Assassination as Television Programming. I did not know about that article. So I'm glad you turned me on to that. Widener believes that a counteroffensive was launched in the wake of JFK X's July 2023 release on Amazon Prime and other platforms. Among such counteroffensive, per Widener, was the emergence of Paul Landis, the ex-Secret Service agent who broke his 60-year silence to tell his story, and his role with the magic bullet in The Final Witness. For Widener, the cottage industry of conspiracy theories is just as wrong as the Warren Commission. I suppose in my own book on the assassination, The Mad Bishops falls into the counteroffensive category as well, as it was published in November 2023 by Trying Day. That's why I haven't heard about it. And my subsequent documentary short, David Ferry, which includes reflections from civil rights expert Jim Robenwald, who helped Landis navigate the intense media exposure, might also be considered part of the counteroffensive. However, I only learned about JFK X solving the crime of the century a few days ago, and I enjoyed the film. I encourage anyone who's listening to see it. I appreciate earnest, fringe, low-budget efforts as alternatives to the over-budgeted franchise projects we're force-fed. And I suspect I'm not the only one. Second that one, brother. Which brings me to the final piece of Widener's theory, Mary Pinchot Meyer. According to Peter Janey's 2016 book, Mary's Mosaic, Mary Pinchot Meyer was involved in a serious affair with President Kennedy. 2 days shy of her 44th birthday, on the cool morning of October 12, 1964, Pinchot was walking along the Chesapeake and Ohio towpath, a path Meyer often walked with Jackie Kennedy, when she was shot twice, once in the back and once in the head. According to Widener, this was a staged murder so that John and Mary could be united in an Onassis-protected oasis, Scorpios. Here I'll take leave of the world of JFK X and propose further investigation to another oasis, Cuernavaca, Mexico, particularly the elite enclave Rancho Tiltela. The sheer number of elite and successful Texas businessmen and socialite women shuttling back and forth, namely to Dallas, namely from Cuernavaca, has gone totally unexplored. Sam Giancana found refuge in Rancho Tiltela and warded off FBI attempts to extradite him to the U.S. Rancho Tiltela itself was originally private property of wealthy Texas Colonel Harry E. Stewart, whose ex-wife oversaw the community during Giancana's residency. Cuernavaca also functioned as a refuge from the psychedelic community, characterized by Timothy Leary's experimentation with psilocybin mushrooms, to the de-Yankification mission school of controversial ex-Catholic priest Ivan Illich, the center of intercultural formation. Ostensibly, Leary counted among his friends Mary Pinchot Meyer. That's exactly right. Harvard lecturer in psychology, Leary recounted in his 1983 autobiography, Flashbacks, how he first met Mary Pinchot Meyer in spring 1962. I'm Mary Pinchot. I've come from Washington to discuss something very important. I want to learn how to run an LSD session. Leary goes on to detail the alleged conversation that followed that evening after Pinchot helped make dinner for Leary's kids. The adults then took a low dose of mushrooms and chatted around the fire. You don't really understand what's happening in Washington with drugs, do you? That's Mary saying that. And then Larry says, we've heard some rumors about the military. Then Mary says, it's time to learn more. The guys who run things, the guys who really run things in Washington, are very interested in psychology and drugs in particular. These people play hardball, Timothy. They want to use drugs for warfare, for espionage, for brainwashing, for control. Yes, I said, we heard about that. But there are people like me who want to use drugs for peace, not war, to make people's lives better. Will you help us? How? I told you, teach us how to run sessions, use drugs to do good. Mary Pinchot Meyer's murderer was never found. Mary was an abstract painter. At the time of her death, her paintings were on tour in London, in Latin America, sponsored by the Pan American Union, which is a CIA outlet, I might add. Meanwhile, Mary's former husband was a CIA man deeply entrenched in Latin American covert operations affairs. Together with Costa Rican President Jose Figueres Ferrer, Cord Meyer Jr. created the Inter-American Democrat Social Movement, conceived as a left-wing political movement in order to influence the anti-communist left in Latin America. He was also a pivotal player in the CIA's media operation, Mockingbird. Curiously, readers of my previous articles will recall numerous references to the Civil Air Patrol as popping up as key points in the JFK case. It is no different with Cord Meyer. His father, Cord Meyer Sr., served with D.H. Byrd on the CAP executive board and founded the CAP New York branch. Byrd, of course, was the owner of the Texas School Book Depository, which employed former CAP cadet, CAP is Civil Air Patrol, CAP cadet Lee Oswald, the alleged assailant of a Dallas police officer, J.D. Tippit, reportedly fled into the Abundant Life Temple Church building, then operated by former CAP chaplain. Then there's a possibility of former CAP Civil Air Patrol man present when Oswald entered the Texas Theater. Lee Oswald, or someone impersonating him, was in Cuernavaca during the mysterious Mexico trip in September 1963. Once in Mexico, the Lee Oswald figure met Honduran Luis Fernandez Gonzalez, a member of the Movimiento de Liberación Nacional, the National Liberation Movement, in front of the Hotel Reforma on September 28th. Oswald introduced himself to Gonzalez as John White. The next day, Fernandez joined John White and Saul Lopez, press chief of the National Liberation Movement in Mexico, on a trip to Cuernavaca, spending the day at the Casino de la Selva, a resort from a bygone era that used to entertain the likes of Al Capone, Bugsy Siegel, before the hotel casino was shut down. It remains open as a nightclub where Sam Giancana frequented while Rancho Tiltela resident under the alias Sam De Palma. When Lee Oswald figure purchased a tourist card for entry into Mexico on September 17th, 1963. The previous tourist card issued the same day was to William Gaudet, a source for the Central Intelligence Domestic Contact Division, and one who had seen Oswald together with Guy Bannister and David Ferry in New Orleans. On the surface, this suggests that Oswald and Gaudet obtained their tourist cards together. However, there is another dimension: Gaudet's association with Nelson Rockefeller's Inter-American Affairs. Gaudet claimed his publication, the Latin American Newsletter and the Latin American Report, were of great value to Inter-American affairs. Gaudet told researcher Bud Festerwall in 1975, as quoted in Jeffrey Caulfield's General Walker and the Murder of President Kennedy, that he was, quote, a secret agent for Nelson Rockefeller in Latin America during World War II and switched to the CIA in 1947, working with them until 1969. Gaudet was suspected of being an informant for Stephen B. Lemon, legal counsel for WDSU in New Orleans. I've already written about WDSU in relation to the assassination media campaign to Sully Lee Oswald. Further, William Gaudet knew Jack Ruby when Jack Ruby bought artwork in New Orleans for Alger H. Meadows in 1959 for H.P. Albury's coup in Dallas. Along with Gaudet, George de Montchelt also reportedly worked for Rockefeller's Inter-American Affairs. Corna Novaka, Inter-American Affairs, and the Good Neighbor Commission is an intriguing triangle of espionage with Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963 in the middle. The Good Neighbor Commission of Texas was established by Governor Coke Stevenson in 1943 with its principal plan to tackle discrimination and improve labor relations for Mexicans living and working in Texas. Its origins come once again from Nelson Rockefeller's Inter-American Affairs. The who's who of Texas elite were tapped to lend their resources to the commission's efforts. Oil magnate Neville Penrose, future chairman of the Good Neighbor Commission and father-in-law of CBS correspondent Bob Schieffer, also owned property in Cuernavaca. H. Pete Cotfield, wealthy oil magnate with ties to Lyndon Johnson and deeply involved in the Texas prison system. Lloyd Benson Sr., then a senior colonel in the Texas State Guard Reserve Corps and father of the future Senator Lloyd Benson Jr. D.H. Byrd, Clint Murchison, whose oil interests stretched from Franco Spain to Haiti, whose wealth extended to owning a private island off the Gulf of Mexico in Veracruz. He also employed George D. Montchelt at Three States Oil and Gas Company. In sum, the Good Neighbor Commission, with the blessing of the governor and the help of the Office of Inter-American Affairs, operated as a de facto government within a government. There were those duly elected to serve the people, and there were those who really ran things behind the scene. While JFK X should be applauded for including the actual tape of Klansman Joseph Miltier conversing 2 weeks before the assassination with FBI Miami police informant Willie Somerset that plans were in the works to shoot JFK from an office building with a high-powered rifle and that a patsy would be picked up shortly after the school year. Unfortunately, nothing else is said about Miltier, who is in Dallas on November 22nd and is a vital figure to understanding the radical right's loathing of the president and desire to see him gone. On one hand, it's easy to dismiss JFK X solving the crime of the century as an outlandish fantasy. On the other hand, it's been over 60 years and the case remains convoluted, complex, and frankly, a cliche in pop culture. In this way, what Widener and Lee are presenting, standing on the shoulders of McCloskey, James Shelby Downard, and David Icke and others, is that perhaps the unbelievable concept of Kennedy faking his death is not so unbelievable after all. What else really is there? Could this actually be what has been sealed away all these decades? Why it remains a matter of national security, why a 75-year ban was initially put on Warren Commission documents and deliberations, why Jackie's pink suit is not to be displayed publicly until 2103, referring to the withholding of the JFK files during his time in office. Then President Trump told Andrew Napolitano in January 2021, Judge, this is quote, Judge, if they showed you what they showed me, you wouldn't have released it either, unquote. And that's from James Day article, an article by him, a review of JFK X. He's apparently a writer. I'll have to pick up his book. And I think that's a fairly comprehensive review of the movie. And I think he fully grokks it, and he gets where I'm going. He may not agree with me 100%, and that's totally fine. You don't have to agree with me 100%. I don't really care. But anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. I am Jay Widener, and you are watching Reality Check. Please step in and come and watch the next one that I do. And thanks for watching.